boxing is a fighting art. It's inherently all about conflict and confrontation. With so much on the line in each fight, including money, fame, image, and self-confidence, the ideal conditions for some of the most intense feuds that two men can engage in have been created time and again. Of course, a good fight for the camera also sells tickets like hotcakes and rallies fans unlike anything else. But today, we'll look at some of the most outrageous and really intense feuds in boxing's past. You don't get to see much of that outside of influencer boxing anymore. Therefore, we're counting down 5 of boxing's greatest rivalries, and this is a list we think everyone can agree on. Number 5. Jack Johnson versus Sam McVea. This is probably one of the first recorded and well-known rivalries ever in boxing. By some accounts, though, it was more than just a simple rivalry between two great boxers, as it often included Joe Jeanette, Harry Wills, Sam Langford, and Big Bill Tate all participating in this rivalry. And it's indeed something we may never ever see again. And that's for good reason. All of these men competed during the turn of the 20th century. These boxers were part of a group of gifted fighters excluded from competing for the Universal Heavyweight Championship due to the prevailing attitudes regarding how some people were classified in the United States at that time. And they had been feuding for the express chance to be the first to be recognized as the true world champion. On February 5th of 1903, Jack Johnson defeated Denver Ed Martin by a split-point decision to win what was referred to at that time as the Black or Colored Heavyweight Championship of the world. This colored title was officially considered to be lower than the regular one, so the struggle was real. 3 weeks later, after the 5th of February, Johnson went on to defeat the formidable Sam McVea to successfully complete his first defense of the title. Johnson and McVea in particular fought 2 brutal and bitter bouts. It was a sight to see since they had traded adversarial gestures before and during the fight. Near the end of their first match, Johnson even shouted, "See here, Sam, don't you crowd me," when McVea tried to close the distance and smother him. The river would end with Johnson winning both bouts, and the abolition of the colored title would still be some years away. Number 4. Arturo Gatti versus Mickey Ward. The rivalry between Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward is one of the most celebrated in boxing history. They fought 3 times in 13 months, making for a total of 30 rounds contested between the two of them. In their first fight at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut in 2002, there were no belts on offer or undefeated records to protect. Even then, a beef to last a lifetime was started immediately. The fight left both men cut and bloody, each going ham at each other. Gatti won the next 2 fights, which were the last 2 fights of Ward's career. But throughout all of this, a special bond developed between the two of them, and they fast became friends. For the final fight of his own career, Gatti hired his great rival as his trainer. Their fights were full of excitement and heart, becoming a yardstick by which excitement in the boxing ring could forever be measured. The 9th round of their first fight is often referred to as the round of the century. It was 3 minutes in which more punches were thrown than some entire 12-round fights can boast. Some say that their trilogy injected new blood into boxing and made new believers of jaded fight fans, while at the same time, it was successful in bringing in millions of new admirers. Keep in mind that this was during the 2000s. The extreme excitement that surrounded boxing in the early 90s was gone. Their rivalry is remembered not just for the veracity of their fights, but also for the respect and friendship they shared outside the ring. Nothing could be as crushing as when Arturo Gatti committed suicide in Brazil, leaving behind a wife and a 10-month-old son. Mickey Ward continued to remember him fondly. He once said, "I miss him to death every day. He's always with me. I know he's here." Number 3. Ted Lewis versus Jack Britton. The rivalry between Ted Kid Lewis and Jack Britton is one of the most significant in boxing history. They fought each other an incredible 19 times, with 6 of those meetings being for the world title. Such numbers make sense because they competed during the early 1900s, long before the current boxing conventions crystallized. With boxing being a working man's sport more or less, the beef got good. Their first fight was a non-title bout on March 26, 1915, which Britton won by decision. Of course, Lewis wasn't willing to let that insult to his championship status slide, so they had a rematch with the world title at stake, which Lewis was holding on August 31st in Boston, and Lewis won by a 12-round decision. However, the frequency of their matches led to some speculation. For instance, they were matched 4 times in a span of just 36 days in 1917. This led to speculation that at least some of their meetings were choreographed. More than half of the contests were no-decision bouts, some scheduled for only 6 or 8 rounds, while others had no weigh-ins at all. Despite these controversies, there's no question that Britton and Lewis were among the best boxers of their time. On top of that, Jack Britton was American, while Ted Lewis was British, making for a classic transatlantic story of confrontation. Their rivalry was so intense that it resulted in the New York State Athletic Commission banning the use of mouthguards on February 12th after a bout where Britton protested against the mouthpiece Lewis was using. Their 20th and final confrontation was a brutal 15-round unanimous decision victory for Britton on February 7, 1921, at Madison Square Garden in New York. To this day, their prolific nature of the rivalry can never be forgotten. Number 2. Jake LaMotta versus Sugar Ray Robinson. The rivalry between Sugar Ray Robinson and Jake LaMotta is one of the most memorable in boxing history, fighting each other 6 times over a span of 9 years. Their first bout saw LaMotta score a knockdown in the first round, but Robinson won by unanimous decision. In their second head-to-head confrontation, LaMotta handed Robinson his first loss in 126 amateur and pro fights. LaMotta literally sent Robinson through the ropes in the 8th round of the rematch. Their third bout saw LaMotta drop Robinson for a 9 count in the 7th round, only to lose another decision. They went on to renew their rivalry 2 years later in Madison Square Garden, where Robinson scored a unanimous decision. Their 6th and final fight, on Valentine's Day 1951, was a brutal and bloody affair, in which Robinson battered LaMotta but could not knock him down. This fight came to be known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. LaMotta held on to the ropes, his pride, and the knowledge that he would not be put down. Some of our viewers may note this event was not one of the key plot points of 1980's Raging Bull about the life of Jake LaMotta, with Robert De Niro playing him. The slow-motion shot of Jake LaMotta in the film, all bloodied and battered, proclaiming, "You never got me down, Ray," has also gone down in history as one of the greatest in film history, highlighting a rivalry being carried out to the bitter end. Robinson retained his world middleweight title and cemented his legacy as one of the greatest boxers of all time before losing to Carmen Basillo in 1957. Despite Robinson winning 5 of their 6 meetings, their clashing styles led to competitive contests each time. Their rivalry is remembered for its intensity and is considered one of boxing's best. Jake LaMotta lived till the age of 95, and the fact that he faced down the terrifying Sugar Ray Robinson 6 times, knowing that Robinson had accidentally caused the death of one of his opponents in the ring before, makes this rivalry all the more monumental. Number 1. Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. The rivalry between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier is one of the most iconic in the history of boxing. They fought each other 3 times, with the first fight being billed as the fight of the century. Their first encounter was on March 8, 1971, at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Both were undefeated champions who held legitimate claims to the heavyweight title. Ali had won the title from the terrifying Sonny Liston in 1964 and successfully defended his belt until it was stripped by boxing authorities for refusing induction into the armed forces in 1967 in light of the Vietnam War. It was in this context that Muhammad Ali famously declared, "No Vietnamese ever called me nigger." In Ali's absence, Frazier won 2 championship belts and won the first fight in 15 rounds by unanimous decision. Before the fight, Ali was quoted as saying, "I'll be pecking and a-poking, pouring water on his smoking. Then this might shock and amaze you, but I will destroy Joe Frazier." He also said, "Some people say you better watch out. Joe Frazier, he's awful strong. I said tell him to try Bad Roll-On. That's deodorant." The second fight, known as Super Fight 2, took place in 1974. Ali won this fight, setting the stage for their third and final encounter. The third fight, known as the Thriller in Manila, took place in 1975. It was a brutal and grueling match that is often considered one of the greatest fights in boxing history. Ali won the fight after Frazier's corner threw in the towel at the end of the 14th round. Ali once said about Frazier, "I'll always bring out the best in the men I fight. But Joe Frazier, I'll tell the world right now, brings out the best in me. I'm gonna tell you, that's one hell of a man, and God bless him." He also humorously remarked, "Frazier is so ugly that when he cries, the tears turn around and go down the back of his head." Their rivalry was not just limited to the ring. Ali, who had become a symbol of the anti-establishment public during the government-imposed exile from the ring, contrasted with Frazier, who supported U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. The culture wars of the time and the growing unpopularity of the American campaign to fight communist North Vietnam in favor of the South heightened the profile of the rivalry to unseen heights. Despite their intense rivalry, both men had a deep respect for each other. After Frazier's death, Ali was among the first to respond, saying, "That's one hell of a man, and God bless him." Do you agree with our list? Leave us a like and subscribe if you agree, or let us know in the comments if you think the ranking's off. We'll see you again when the dust settles on the canvas.